Yeah? Oh, that's good. Huh? So now they're over here. I was just wondering, where are you? Huh? But I think Jamie is kicking off for today, right? And so it's your stage now. Huh?
Wonderful. Good morning. Did everyone have fun last night? There was a lot of fun because there's so many empty seats right now. I'm very happy for all of you watching this on video. You had a good time. All right, we're talking about migration this morning. It's a very simple construct that can go wrong in so many wonderfully elaborate ways. So during migrations, SEOs have a very unique vantage point. We are able to go ahead and get data, get reflections into site health that normally wouldn't be available from another medium. The changes that we recommend, the work that we prioritize during a migration affects all mediums, but is most visible through ours, and in a lot of ways by the recommendations and information given to us via Search Console and other webmaster tools. There are multiple types of migration. Some of them are very easy to recognize immediately. Others are more subtle. If you switch your servers, that is a migration. It does not appear any different to a user, but because that site now has technical details behind the scene that differ from how Google has previously experienced the content, it will be reconsidered as though it is new. We have a standard, let's add a security certificate. I highly recommend, if you are not SSL by now, please go get your SSL cert. There are features out there, services out there to actually provide those for you free of charge. And secure by default is a portion of ranking. And of course, if we change a URL, so this can be our URL paths or it can be our host name. We need to identify what type of migration it is so we can isolate that and focus. We don't want to combine multiple migrations at once. If you're doing a redesign and a hostname change, separate them out. There's going to be enough chaos and cake for everyone as it stands. By keeping those independent variables, we can isolate and troubleshoot much more effectively. Before we migrate, there's a number of things that are going to benefit us to set up in a proper structure to ensure that we have success. We need to define success before we launch. Having these clear performance indicators mean that when things get hairy, there's not a question about the data. There's not a question about how it's measured. When you set a defined plan, everyone's on the same page, and it sets reasonable expectations for you and for your teammates. A checklist. Make sure you know your people and you know your timings. You are not going to be an island during a migration. There will be other team members involved. If you have an ad team, they're going to need to go ahead and adjust their campaigns. Your DevOps team will need to make changes to your server configurations. If we have CDNs in play, you'll need to flush those so it reflects the new content. All hands on deck to keep a site healthy during the changeover. Define what will break your plan. What will make a no-go? What are your deal breakers for a successful transition? If you hit those, openly communicate. Clear communication is your most effective weapon in this scenario. We want to identify content that is low risk. So let's not send our favorite chimp into space first. If we're doing a large-scale migration, identify something that doesn't have a high value that you could afford to potentially lose if something went wrong. Identify the lowest risk time frame. Is your site traffic highest on the weekends? Don't migrate on the weekends. Conduct your content inventory. What do you have out there? Is it what you expect? We want to go ahead and take that inventory, that thing that goes, I have 75 blog articles, I have 15 white papers, and actually compare it to what exists in the wild. Expectations and reality tend to differ in very significant ways. Once we have that gap, once we identify what we expect to exist and what does, let's do the best we can to align the two. It won't always be perfect, and that's okay. But it's simply as though you were moving to a new house. You want to take out the trash before you move. No one wants to pack a full trash can. Crawl your new site and compare your inventory. So, do the things we expect to exist in both locations? What additionally exists? And this crawl is going to give you a number of other insights. We're going to be able to see perhaps where there are blind spots into our technology. So we weren't aware of an entire section of the site. It may sound strange, but it's really not that uncommon. Map your redirects. Know where old requests are going to land on new. It's a very simple premise, but surprisingly easy when we think a mapping will always be one-to-one. Sometimes our content has lived in many locations, and we're not aware of that. Take our analytics inventory. Launching a new CMS, launching any form of new content without having visibility into how it's performing is your worst nightmare. We cannot measure success if we don't have visibility into performance. Use the same analytics tracking ID. This will be very beneficial to you because it's then consistent and transitions from the previous version to the new without issue. Highly recommend, rather than making a new property, or please don't make one, but a new account, we utilize view-level filters to focus that data exclusively on our host name. In this example, we use a staging name. Establish our baseline for performance. We always want to improve our sites. We want to improve our digital presence, make the web better. We don't know what better looks like until we know what now is. Google has fantastic tools in the Chrome User Experience Report and in Lighthouse to let us figure out by page template or type how they're performing. And remember that performance can vary substantially between template types. So if you run an e-commerce site, a category page could behave much differently than a product detail page. Breaking your site isn't binary. It's not does it break, it's how it breaks. And it's not who broke it, it's how it breaks. If you understand how to break your own site, you'll understand where the weaknesses are in your stack and be able to better adapt to your users' needs, to your needs, and to performance. And plus, it's kind of fun. We want to crawl production, crawler staging, compare those, and persistently repeat. Last time I launched a new migration, I had 80 gigs worth of crawl data easy, just because every iteration, every change the devs made to our new environments required our new lists of testing. Different tools out there give you different options. I personally use Screaming Frog quite a bit. It enables me to go ahead and grab screenshots as well, very beneficial. Remember that if your staging ground is public-facing, a disallow robots.txt will not prevent search engines from indexing it. We need to use our noIndex tag. Also, if we have a robots.txt disallow and then we add a noindex, there's not a guarantee that a search engine will come back and be able to discover that content now has a noindex tag. If your staging ground is public-facing, verify it in Webmaster Tools as soon as you can, especially things that aren't supposed to be indexed. Get your eyes on those. There's a lot to be said for using first-party tools, particularly when it comes to how content is rendered. If you are launching a new code base, particularly if you're working with a lot of JavaScript, use Google tools directly. So what you can emulate via a crawler or another tool may not be the same as Googlebot itself. Right now, we know the web rendering service is using Chrome 41, which is beyond outdated. I'm sure good things will come from that, but it does mean that there are behaviors that we don't expect. On having eyes on those, that first-party resource is going to give us better insight into can our content be successfully rendered, or how does it break? When we go live, this is, in my experience, an all-hands-on-deck scenario. If you haven't got to spend a lot of quality bonding time with your team, you're about to. There are going to be some terrible pizzas ordered to your office. its sustenance, take that and some coffee, and be ready to go. At Go Live, we want to get verification and domain preferences set up for our new site as quickly as we can. We want to check our X-Robots headers. Frequently, as an honestly best practice, we'll add a no-index tag via that X-Robots header as a redundancy, a way to say, hey, search engine, you sneaky thing, you found your way in here. While we appreciate the effort, we still don't want you to show this content. One of the most precarious things can be that not being rolled back. If you are working with a JavaScript framework, I recommend you do this before launch, but that initial HTML and your full page render may not be the same thing. There are some devs who have added a no-index tag in the initial HTML parse, and then that's overwritten in the rendered DOM. As we understand Googlebot, that first initial parse, if it sees a no-index, it's never going to come back to experience that DOM. Be hands-on and work with your devs as we go through these steps. We want to test our robots.txt live. Nothing is worse than launching a site and seeing a failure to launch by a wildcard disallowed. Check our host name. Look for port 81 if we have devs who are working on a local build. Port 81 is their way of saying this is our centralized local build of that content. Obviously, we don't want to use that. Our preferred name is our preferred name. If our staging ground URL is being used in hreflang, AMP, or canonical, get eyes on that. Get that corrected as quickly as possible. Server logs provide faster insight into issues than Search Console will. I know many of us, including myself, were dependent on Google Search Console data to give us the number of 404s and 500s. That only updates once or twice a week. At Go Live, that can be critical time. We lose that time. We lose money on initiative or inertia behind our new site launch. If you are using a content delivery network, flush it. It may be referring to old resources, such as scripts or CSS. If we're calling those, pages won't render successfully. We'll have a bad user experience. After we launch, take a deep breath, submit your sitemaps, and defend the redirects that you've put in play for your old domain or URL pathways as long as you can. I frequently engage with this conversation. Hey, can we take these down yet? There's no harm in leaving them there, and ultimately, a user who may have had that bookmarked or had it shared in some way is still able to resolve to their intent. Keep them. No harm, no foul. In the same way that you don't want to give up your old domain, keep these. Most importantly, and this is actually a screenshot from a Go Live, pray to the gods old and new, because there are always going to be hiccups and fun rabbit holes to go down when you launch a new domain, move security protocols, change your servers. It's about critical thinking and adapting on the fly, but it makes for very fun experiences, and I hope you can take some of this information and make it work for you and your team. Thank you so much.
So, super, thanks. Oh my God, what happened to me? There's something like...
That's impressive.
This is my mic, right? Super, I carry this over here. Thanks very much, Jamie. Just one question before before maybe Patrick starts. When you were talking about the hiccups in the post-migration phase, what do you expect usually as a phase of hiccups? You say, well, 1 week is fine, or you say, well, no, usually from my experience it's 6 weeks, 3 months, or how long should these hiccups take?
So it depends. Is it a hiccup, or is it like stomach flu?
Yeah.
It's like a minor hiccup, okay, we can handle that one going out. As long as we have to, if there's a higher priority for business value, then that's going to go to the back of your backlog. Yeah. If it's something that is preventing users from engaging or converting, that's a higher priority. So there's never a set timeline. It's a matter of, I have a cut. Okay, is it a paper cut, or is it a machete cut? Are we missing a limb, or are we going to be fine with a Band-Aid?
Super, thanks very much. So, welcome, Patrick, now, and it's your stage.
Thank you.
So, please give Patrick a warm applause. Super.
How's everyone doing? I've never been bigger. That is an amazing setup, but I'm big enough. I don't think I need that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of business processes and how your migrations are going to go wrong, because they will. It's inevitable. There's too many moving parts, too much complexity. My one disclaimer, opinions are my own. They are not IBM. Don't go say IBM said, say Patrick said. Legal makes me do that because I say bad things sometimes. When you're doing a migration, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of teams involved, a lot of processes. I know Germans are very process-oriented. They have processes for processes, but something is still going to happen. It's inevitable. The more you're doing, the more likely something is going to happen. I don't know if I need to point this somewhere. There we go. So as Jamie said, have a plan. I know there's probably simplified migration processes. There's complex, detail-oriented. That's kind of how we do it. We give some teams a very simple thing because they're like, well, what are you doing? And they're not going to understand the long list, or they're never going to look at it. So we know what to check usually after the fact. So we have more detailed ones. Getting the right people involved, this is important. Making sure all the right people are in the meetings. All the people are there that need to be involved in the process. That includes SEO, social, paid, PR, analytics, apps and platforms, email or marketing automation, devs, infrastructure. There's so many different teams that could be involved. Just making sure that, right person, right job, that they know what their part of it is. Because if you're offloading as many tasks as you can, I'm not going to say offloading is a bad way to put that. I'm not putting my work on someone else, but they have their own part. And the goals are important too, like setting the expectation. So the stomach flu or the hiccup, things can go wrong. I always tell people, assuming everything goes well, we'll be fine within 3 weeks. There's probably a time where things are kind of shifting back and forth between maybe domains or even with HTTP, HTTPS, you'll have data in multiple places. Deadlines are important. Make sure they're realistic. If for us, sometimes an exec will come and say, "Oh yeah, can you do this by tomorrow?" No, we cannot. It's always interesting because they're like, "Oh, well, we have this big event coming up. We need to have this new site launched, this new whole CMS system, and oh yeah, it's all custom." And we're like, "Well, that's going to go wrong." Then they change the target. They're like, "Oh, well, we want this, or we want that, we want something else." The stuff is constantly in process, and there's never enough resources to handle all of this. One of the most important things for us is letting people know that, hey, we bought company X. We tend to buy one company a month. I think we have for, on average, 20-some years now, one major acquisition a month. We actually have a Wikipedia page about all the different IBM acquisitions. Our latest being Red Hat at $34 billion. I didn't even know we had that kind of money, but okay. But letting people know before that you are now part of this company, this overarching brand, that when this is happening, when this change is coming, that you're bringing this company's website within your own, which I highly recommend. Consolidating stuff is great. Huge wins. During it, making sure that they still know, this is now part of this thing. And after, someone's going to change the name. Execs always want to put their mark on something. They want it to be now, instead of whatever they want it to be, IBM, whatever. That's not just for us. It happens with everyone's acquisitions. But keeping the old name somewhere on the page, saying formerly this, or previously known as this other brand, is helpful, because sometimes on those older ones, pages like Wikipedia or Crunchbase and stuff, they might actually start outranking you for your old brand. That's kind of a bad thing. Don't panic. There's nothing that can't be fixed later. I know this goes against everything Germans believe in. They want it right 100%. Unfortunately, with migrations, there's too many people, too much complexity. I'm not going to say it never goes right, but there's always going to be a few things to kind of clean up later. And it really doesn't have to be perfect before it launches. One thing I've learned is like just let people get it done. We can fix pretty much everything after, unless they do something really, really stupid, like they drop a whole domain for a company we acquired. Like, well, that's a little harder to get back. We can do it because luckily our legal team is a pain for people. The most likely thing that's going to go wrong with a migration is going to be redirects. It's all about consolidation of signals, and I'm actually going to talk about redirects quite a bit here and how they work, because it's not quite how SEOs see them. So there's no value lost. I don't know why people don't believe this. Google has said this repeatedly. It's true, and it doesn't matter if it's a redirect. It doesn't matter if it's 301, 302. JavaScript, it could be a canonical, even a meta refresh of 0, it either consolidates or it doesn't. It passes all the value or it doesn't. You want to map them one-to-one as much as possible. The reason being, if it's not relevant, they may not pass all the value. There's other formats too that people tend to forget about, PDFs, images. If you haven't noticed, Google is pushing image search hard this year. Don't lose the value from your images in a migration. That's probably one of the most common things that I see. And as Jamie said, maintain the older redirects too. And that includes like legacy 5 versions ago, multiple domains ago. Like keep that stuff in place. Because all this stuff is checked kind of at the time of crawl. So anytime they go back to an old link and they go on a page that links to you, could have been 15 years ago, if they happen to go recheck that, which Google randomly rechecks 20-some-year-old stuff. If they happen to recheck that, that link is there, but that domain or whatever page was there is no longer there, you just lost that link. This one is interesting. John Mueller's talked about this with the no index being treated as no follow eventually. What's actually happening there is the signals are dropped. So if you're 404 long enough or you 410, as soon as you get removed from that index, all the signals for that page are completely lost. Again, the signals are actually checked at the time of crawl. So if they crawl and that page isn't in their index, they don't store that data on their end. It's pretty quick to consolidate. This is why you'll see, maybe the hiccup kind of thing. Usually within a few weeks, they're going to consolidate signals from A to B, like from one to the other. Once that happens, I think this is something that most SEOs don't realize. All the signals at the original URL, once that consolidation happens at the new one, these are lost. They're gone. That doesn't mean they're gone forever, but they're gone in the sense that until something changes, like if I change where that redirect is going to a new location, if you've ever done that, you'll see, hey, it didn't really have an impact, not an immediate impact. It's because all the links that were to that original URL, if you change this, now have to be recrawled to get the signals back to the original page instead of the new one. 301 versus 302. Oh, there's so much debate in the SEO community about this. 301, with a 301, all the signals go to the new one, period, done. With a 302, what actually happens is, I'll say this, what most SEOs believe is that on the first page, it has signals, on the new page, it has signals, and somehow they both have signals at the same time. No, what is actually going to happen is it's like a reverse canonical almost. The second page, the one you're redirecting to with the 302, actually consolidates back. You'll actually find the links for it as, what is it, in the new Search Console. It used to be via intermediate link. Now it's, they changed the wording on me. But anyway, if you check the links report, it'll say the link is actually to this page instead, but it will be consolidating backwards, which is kind of interesting. Sometimes other things might come into play, like canonical tags. Like you basically, if you have mixed signals, things are going to work a little different. You can technically 302 and then canonical back, and things will be consolidated there for longer. If you don't do that, eventually it's probably going to switch to the new URL. So on the original, the links were there. It gets consolidated there with a 302. Eventually, because that's been in place long enough, they're going to kind of treat it like a 301, and they're going to consolidate to the new one. What happens if you redirect to auto-one page? One-to-one, you're going to pass it all. It's fine. This is really all about relevance. So if you're redirecting a bunch of stuff to your home page, it may or may not get passed. It really just depends how close that is. I think they get passed for a while, but then I think John Mueller describes it as being treated as soft 404. Gary Eesh is like, I don't know what you're talking about. They all go there. It's fine. So we actually don't know quite how that works still. What happens if you don't keep the legacy redirects? I talked about this a little bit already. They'll eventually be lost. When they're checked to the crawl, if they're not there, gone. I will keep most redirects that I find important that have links to them till the day I die. As long as they still have links, or as long as they still have traffic to them, I'm keeping them as best I can. Unfortunately, sometimes it's not my decision. What if I redirect images to a page? This doesn't work. Users will be redirected. Links do not count. If you don't notice, I have an info command that is gone now. I submitted my slides like 2 weeks ago, like everyone's supposed to, and I didn't realize this conference would let me change them ahead of time. That does not work in the US. They're like, your slides are your slides, you're done. So I'm going to talk to this a little bit. Yeah, info command is no longer there. The best way to do it is now going to be, nope, the via intermediate links is not there. What is that called now? It's like links to this page instead. If you go to the link report and click into one of the sites for a page that's redirected, it'll actually show you the original URL where that link is. There's a lot of places redirects can fire these days, especially in a complex environment. DNS, CDNs, middleware systems, such as like maybe distilled ODN. I know Tom Anthony was here. But there's multiple middleware systems where this can be a problem. Server level, language-based, plugins, modules, CMS systems. There's really a lot of locations this can happen, and it makes it a little harder to troubleshoot. I'll actually talk about how to do that in a minute. DNS doesn't have a protocol. If you do a redirect there, you can't actually use like HTTP or HTTPS. It's one domain to another. So I've seen this with like HTTPS migrations where people want to redirect it, and they're like, it doesn't work. Well, yeah, it's not even a thing. The protocol isn't a thing at the DNS level. You kind of have to catch the redirects, like preserve the path and then catch them on the new server is kind of how that works. A lot of people will leave an old server up just because they don't know how to do the redirects properly. Now you're paying for like two servers, 2 hosting environments. It's kind of interesting because I see people do this all the time. And then eventually someone stops paying for that and things break, all the redirects are gone. Uh-oh. So this crashed, I think. Yay, I don't know what to do. Oh, they're handling it in the back. Okay, great. I'll just stand up here.
Maybe I can do some pantomime stuff or like this, showing your slides.
I like this interpretive slides. Go.
Yeah.
Yeah, we dance the slides over here. Huh? Now they're back. Huh?
All right. Yeah, don't panic. That's the main thing. Right when it comes back up. Now we got to get through. Okay, letting an old domain expire, bad. Again, once they recrawl, signal's lost, link's lost. If you put the redirect in an HT access on the old server, this is what I was talking about, or a server config, like once you stop paying for that server, they're gone. I see this happen all the time, and it'll usually be like a year later, 5 years later. It doesn't matter, like it's still gone. If your site was HTTPS and you leave the old server up, remember to renew their certificate. Now that more sites are on HTTPS, this problem is becoming more common. You can actually get like a multi-domain certificate or whatever to solve for this, but what's happening is if you let the HTTPS on the old server expire and you still have that live, users get redirected to the new page. Search engines do, sorry. Search engines get redirected still. They kind of ignore the error, but users get an error page. So they're not actually going to be redirected unless they like click to add an exception. No one does that. But that's an interesting problem that's popped up only in the last couple years, I would say. Redirect opportunities, Ahrefs is my go-to for this. Best by links report. Look for 404s. Has links. They even have their what is it, the Euroscore for the pages. So here are your most valuable pages that currently 404. Fix those. Quick win, really quick win. You can also look through like the 300 status codes, see which ones are redirecting to say maybe a home page or a category, and see if you have a better location for any of those. To actually check where the redirects are coming from, the header responses offer a lot of clues. You can either use Chrome DevTools or like, what's the popular one over here? Link Research Tools, redirect path. If you actually click that instead of looking at just the change, if you click in, it'll show you the header responses. A lot of times there's clues that say, oh, this was, this was a WordPress, or this is done by Cloudflare, or wherever it is, we'll usually have some kind of signal to show kind of where that was fired. And you can look at each step to troubleshoot like which system it is. Some systems have started to identify themselves. I wish more would, because honestly, that would make my job a lot easier. If you can, move redirects to the edge, to your CDN level. I don't see this enough, and I don't know why. It's really fast. It's an elegant solution. Doesn't have to make a round trip. You can store a ton because, hey, it's not even your server resources. Just cache them. You're done. It's also never too late. So I still do this. We are constantly cleaning up redirects from domains we've acquired. We're cleaning up redirects on our own domains. We actually brought in about 7,000 domains into IBM.com last year. It's about 3,500 the year before. I think we have another 4,500 or so to go that we're aiming for this year. But trying to get all this stuff consolidated, trying to fix legacy stuff on our site, IBM.com has been around since 1985. We have a lot of old legacy things. And a lot of that has really good old links, even from, we were just cleaning up some stuff that hasn't existed since the 1990s. We'll see how that goes, how the results are. Set up monitoring for the old domains, security certificates, important pages. There's a lot of things that can go wrong after the fact that you're not looking for. Like doing a check after the migration is great. What about 3 weeks after it? What about 3 months, 3 years? Things are going to happen to this stuff over time. So I highly recommend something like Little Warden, Page Modified. I think Content King has some options for that. Something that is going to check the stuff for you without you having to constantly go back and monitor. I'm not going back and checking 7,000 security certificates for sure. For HTTPS specifically, if you use HSTS, there's a 307 redirect. This is browser cache. A lot of people are like, can you implement a 307? No, not really. It's still a 301 or 302 on the server. You can technically do a 307, but it's not used that way anymore. It hasn't been for years. You can technically do a 308 also. That's pretty much never been used. I've seen that in the wild once. Content security policy. One of the hardest things when doing an HTTPS migration is finding mixed content issues. You can fix that in 2 minutes. Upgrade insecure requests. That is the content security policy you want to set. Basically, if it sees something HTTP, automatically upgrades. It's now all HTTPS. And it's pretty easy to do on most servers and systems, really easy to do on CDNs. There's also a referrer policy. There's, I think, still a misconception where if you switch, or if you're still on HTTP, you automatically, like, if someone comes HTTPS to HTTP, that you lose the referral. You don't have to. Even if you're still on HTTP and you want like to see more of the stuff, you can still get some of that depending on depending on other people's referrer policy in that case. So for sites like directories, this is kind of important because they want to be able to show they're sending people to these sites that might be paying them money or have them listed. They want to show because then they're an important directory, if that's such a thing. But the refer policy gives you more control over what you pass. Google actually has origin. That's the reason we only see google.com as a refer. They don't pass any of the pathing anymore. Jamie kind of covered this. Don't block anything when you're doing a migration, like site to site. Not on the old site, not on the new site. Like, things need to consolidate. Things need to be crawled through. I have info command again. Thank you, Google, for killing that. That is my favorite command. Probably the only one that used it. But yeah, Google said like not a lot of people use it. I have a feeling it was only SEOs, specifically technical SEOs for the most part, that were using that. So good for them. Little hacky workaround then. It's not quite the same system, but if you just put the full URL in there, the first result is probably the same thing. It is typically the canonicalized page. It's not the exact same system as info, but it seems to work fine for the most part. I would do that. Target URL, that's what it's called in the new Search Console. Yay, I updated one. So if you look in the links report, the target URL, if different, is what it looks like in there. So if it's still consolidating, you'll see that from the old versions of the page, from 1 hop ago, from 2 hops ago, from 3 hops ago, I've actually seen up to 10 hops consolidated. That's kind of another misconception. Google, only crawls 5 hops or whatever when it's going through. No, it tries 5 at once, and when it comes back, it resumes from where it left off. That's cool, right? I'm not saying don't clean up your redirect hops. You shouldn't have things going to the main location, but you don't have to. They'll typically grab it. Seeing old pages indexed. People do a site search a lot. They're going to show you your old pages. Even if they go to the new one, even if they consolidate, even if that's how anyone searching any normal term would see it, it's fine. Site search is specifically asking for those pages, so it's going to show it to them. It's not something to worry about. Blocking stuff, don't do that. Sorry, I'm running out of time, so I'm going to go quick. Using no index on the old site, header, robots.txt. No index and robots.txt is not officially supported. I've seen this knock out a whole domain before. Don't do that. And the URL removal tool in Search Console is an interesting case. It technically doesn't remove a URL, it just kind of hides it from search results. So it's still being crawled, it's still technically indexed. Honestly, this just makes it harder to troubleshoot for SEOs to see where things are consolidated, because if it doesn't return the result, I'm like, well, I don't know now, it's weird. But it's also going to knock out your old pages. So if you had old pages that were ranking for things still from another domain, you're just basically removing that. So there's really no reason I would ever do that. Same thing, don't block, don't no index. You want them to crawl through everything. Sitemaps, put your old URLs in a sitemap too, at least for a few weeks, few months. I think this is commonly missed, but hey, that sitemap is a crawl signal. If you have that sitemap, if you have an old sitemap, leave it up. Let them crawl through the page. It's going to help things consolidate faster. The future indexing API, this might work now. You can try it. It's not supposed to, but hey, it is coming for more things. I know there's a thing with WordPress coming. I think Wix might be live already. But the indexing API is a nice shift from Google, from crawling the web to saying, hey, I changed this page. Will you now come and crawl my page? So instead of randomly guessing, has this changed? It'll be nice. Save them a lot of resources, save us a lot of resources. I'm going to kind of skip the analytics thing, but basically just look at your data the right way. Content, watch out. Cutting out successful content. obviously bad. I don't know why people do this when they change a domain. They're like, oh yeah, we had this content that was working great, it was ranking great, driving lots of value, conversions, dead. Internal links too. A lot of people are having conversations around, this is how my website should be structured. Well, the web is messy. It's not a hierarchical view of here's my folders and here's my pages under that. It's links going everywhere throughout the site. How things are internally linked is what matters. For like subdomain, subdirectory, this is kind of how they're going to determine, should I treat this thing as something separate? Should I treat this thing as the same? Amazon doesn't really link to AWS. It's treated differently. If they did, well, if it was like in their main menu, one of their core offerings, they linked to it throughout the site, it would probably consolidate a lot of things for them and they'd be killing it, even more than they are. If you're brought in after the fact, the Wayback Machine is cool. Shows you old versions of pages. You can even see old versions of robots.txt, help troubleshoot things that might have been there in the past. They have an API also, the CDX server. You can basically pull every old URL on your entire website. And that's it for me.
Yeah. Super.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, fantastic. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Patrick. I know we are running into the keynote now, but maybe we have one more question from Slido. I think that's basically a 2 days question. But it seems that moving things from a general top-level domain to country top-level domains and the other way around seems to be a big topic. And so somebody had the question and said, when moving several different country top-level domains with country-specific content to an existing .com domain, what would be the most important things to consider? So if you go from a .de, .fr, and you have an existing .com domain, so is there anything where you say, well, there's a lot to do what I just was talking about, however, this is the single most important thing to have in mind?
No, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know why you would do that if you have a setup that worked already. Yeah. The consolidation doesn't, so for hreflang in particular, the consolidation doesn't happen like most people think. Like, okay, if I move stuff to one domain, a lot of people are like, well, all my links count for that. Well, not really. They just kind of shift and base the signals on what the strongest version is. So it might be your German version here. For me, it might be the US version as our strongest version of the page. So the swap that happens is based on signals for the strongest page in the set, in the series. So I don't know why you would actually change that setup, because I don't think you're actually going to get any benefit. It's just going to be a lot of work, a lot of risk, without really any gain.
Things sometimes have to be like they are, and probably this was the background on the question, but thanks very much for answering this. And so once again, a warm applause for Jamie and Patrick. Thanks. Super. Huh?
No, thank you.
Super.